My wife's affair baby drama. Her brother exposed her lies and destroyed her. Explosive ending exposing the truth. My wife tried to manipulate me with a sob story about her toxic family to cover up her affair baby, but one phone call to her brother exposed the truth and gave me everything I needed to destroy her in court. This isn't just another cheating spouse story. It's the complete psychological demolition of a woman who thought she could gaslight me into accepting her betrayal while she played victim to cover up the most devastating deception of my life. The manipulation started the moment my pregnant wife walked out our front door. She didn't just leave, she orchestrated a dramatic exit designed to make me question everything I thought I knew about our marriage and her family. Within hours of her departure, the sob stories began flowing like a carefully scripted performance. Her family, she claimed, had suddenly turned into monsters who were psychologically torturing her, forcing her to flee to her mother's house for safety while carrying what I believed was our child. Every phone call became a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She would call me sobbing, describing horrific family confrontations that supposedly happened just hours before. "They're trying to turn me against you," she would whisper through fake tears. "They say terrible things about our marriage, about you, about everything we've built together. I can't take it anymore." The stories were elaborate productions. Family members screaming at her, threatening her, creating such a toxic environment that staying in our home had become impossible for her mental health and the safety of our unborn baby. But here's what made her manipulation so insidious. She positioned me as her only ally in this supposed war against her family. According to her narrative, I was the one person who truly understood her, the only one who could provide the emotional support she desperately needed to survive this family crisis. "You're all I have left," she would say, making me feel simultaneously protective and guilty for any doubt that crept into my mind. "Please don't abandon me like everyone else has." The psychological warfare escalated with each conversation. If I dared ask logical questions about the timeline or inconsistencies in her stories, she would immediately flip the script and make me the villain. "I thought you would support me through this," she would say, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't doubt me when I'm already suffering so much. I need you to believe in me, not interrogate me like I'm some kind of criminal." The guilt trips were surgical in their precision, designed to shut down my critical thinking and keep me focused on being her emotional lifeline rather than seeking truth. What made this manipulation particularly cruel was how she exploited my genuine love and concern for her well-being. Every instinct I had as a husband told me to protect and support my pregnant wife during what she claimed was the most traumatic period of her life. She weaponized my devotion against me, using my love as a tool to prevent me from asking the hard questions that would have exposed her lies months earlier. After weeks of this psychological torture, watching the woman I married transform into someone unrecognizable while blaming everyone except herself, a moment of devastating clarity finally broke through the fog of her manipulation. The solution to unraveling her elaborate web of lies was embarrassingly simple. Call someone who had actually witnessed these alleged family dynamics firsthand. Her brother, reasonable, level-headed, and present during the entire time frame when all this supposed trauma was unfolding, would either confirm her stories or expose them as the fabrications I was beginning to suspect they were. As I dialed his number, my hands shaking with anticipation, I knew this single conversation would either validate the family dysfunction she had described or reveal that the woman I married was a master manipulator who had been systematically destroying my sanity for months while covering up something far worse than family drama. Right at that moment, her brother's voice cut through my confusion like a knife through fog, delivering the truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. "Man, I don't know what she's been telling you," he said with a heavy sigh, "but none of that family drama stuff happened the way she's describing it. In fact, most of it didn't happen at all." The words hit me like a physical blow. But what came next would completely demolish the foundation of lies my wife had built around her pregnancy and departure. The real timeline was devastatingly simple and infinitely more cruel than her elaborate family victim narrative. According to her brother, my wife had started an affair with a coworker roughly 4 months before she got pregnant, meaning the entire time she was conceiving what I believed was our child, she was already deep in another man's bed. The affair wasn't some desperate escape from family toxicity. It was a calculated betrayal that had been brewing for months while she smiled at me across our dinner table and planned our future together. Her affair partner had fed her the classic cheater script that every unfaithful spouse hears. He was better than me, their connection was deeper, and she deserved more than what her marriage could offer. When she discovered she was pregnant, instead of coming clean about the affair, she doubled down on the deception and began planning her exit strategy. The pregnancy became her golden ticket to leave me while maintaining her victim status, allowing her to paint herself as a woman forced to flee rather than a wife who had chosen betrayal. But here's where the story gets even more twisted. She had initially planned to move in with her affair partner after giving birth, using her mother's house as a temporary staging ground for her new life. Her dramatic tales about family abuse weren't desperate attempts to save our marriage. They were elaborate cover stories designed to explain away her absence while she prepared to start fresh with the man who had convinced her that leaving her husband was the right choice. The systematic abuse I had endured in the months leading up to her departure suddenly made perfect sense. The emotional distance, the sudden hostility, the way she seemed to find fault with everything I did. It wasn't family stress or pregnancy hormones. It was classic affair behavior, the psychological preparation that cheaters use to justify their betrayal. She had been systematically devaluing me and our relationship to make her upcoming departure feel justified rather than cruel. Her brother's voice was heavy with disgust as he continued unraveling her web of lies. "She told our whole family about the affair before she even left you," he revealed. "She was planning to move in with this guy after the baby was born. The family drama story was just something she made up later when things went sideways." The revelation that her own family knew about her affair while I remained in the dark was like salt in an already gaping wound. What made this betrayal even more devastating was the realization that her elaborate manipulation hadn't been born from desperation or mental breakdown. It had been a calculated strategy from day one. Every tear she shed, every sob story she told, every moment she made me feel guilty for questioning her was part of a master plan to exit our marriage while keeping me as her emotional support system. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too, the excitement of a new relationship and a husband who still believed in her innocence. But the tragedy hadn't stopped there. According to her brother, the most shocking revelations were yet to come. But the tragedy hadn't stopped there. In fact, the most spectacular part of my wife's deception was about to explode in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Her brother's voice turned ice cold as he prepared to describe the birthday catastrophe that would destroy every fantasy my wife had built about her new life. "You want to know what kind of loser she threw away her marriage for?" he snarled. "This piece of garbage showed up to his own kid's birth completely wasted and tried to start a brawl in the maternity ward." The affair partner arrived at the hospital high out of his mind, transforming what should have been a sacred moment into absolute chaos. This man who had convinced my wife he was her upgrade couldn't even stay sober for the birth of his own child. Instead of being the supportive partner she'd fantasized about, he stumbled into the delivery room like a deranged animal, turning the maternity ward into his personal battlefield while she was giving birth. The situation exploded when this psychopath tried to physically fight her entire family right there in the hospital corridors. This maniac was screaming at everyone, throwing punches, completely out of control, her brother said, his voice shaking with rage. Security was about to call the cops. This was her knight in shining armor, a drug-addled lunatic who couldn't handle being in a hospital without starting World War III on the day his kid was born. Then came the paternity test bombshell that sealed her fate forever. The results confirmed everyone's worst fears. The baby belonged to this disaster of a human being, not to me. My wife now had undeniable DNA proof that she had destroyed her marriage for a complete train wreck, with no way to ever pretend this had all been some terrible misunderstanding she could walk back from. But here's where karma delivered the most brutal punchline of all. The moment this coward realized he was actually going to be held responsible for fatherhood, he vanished into thin air like the pathetic ghost he truly was. One day he's promising her forever, the next day his phone's disconnected and he's completely disappeared, her brother said with savage satisfaction. When it came time to actually man up, this hero of hers ran like the coward he always was, leaving her stranded with a newborn and absolutely nothing. The realization hit my wife like a nuclear bomb. The man who had seduced her into destroying everything good in her life had revealed himself to be nothing more than a drug-addicted loser who fled the moment real responsibility appeared. She was now completely alone. No husband, no affair partner, just a screaming newborn and the wreckage of every bridge she had burned. Her brother's voice carried pure venom as he described her panic attack when the full scope of her destruction became clear. That's when the reality check hit her like a freight train, he said with brutal honesty. Your prenup was bulletproof. Your house was yours before marriage, and living in an at-fault state meant she had zero legal leverage. She had literally nuked her entire life for a junkie who abandoned her the second things got real. This was the exact moment when my confident, cheating wife transformed into the desperate, manipulative victim who would soon call me with elaborate family trauma stories. The woman who had been so certain she was upgrading her life was about to learn that karma doesn't just bite, it devours everything you hold dear and leaves you begging for scraps from the husband you betrayed. The realization hit my wife like a nuclear bomb. The man who had seduced her into destroying everything good in her life had revealed himself to be nothing more than a drug-addicted loser who fled the moment real responsibility appeared. She was now completely alone. No husband, no affair partner, just a screaming newborn and the wreckage of every bridge she had burned. Her brother's voice carried pure venom as he described her panic attack when the full scope of her destruction became clear. That's when the reality check hit her like a freight train, he said with brutal honesty. Your prenup was bulletproof. Your house was yours before marriage, and living in an at-fault state meant she had zero legal leverage. She had literally nuked her entire life for a junkie who abandoned her the second things got real. This was the exact moment when my confident, cheating wife transformed into the desperate, manipulative victim who would soon call me with elaborate family trauma stories. The woman who had been so certain she was upgrading her life was about to learn that karma doesn't just bite, it devours everything you hold dear and leaves you begging for scraps from the husband you betrayed. No one expected that my wife's complete destruction would drive her to orchestrate the most twisted psychological warfare campaign of her pathetic life. Her brother's voice dripped with disgust as he exposed the sick timeline of her desperation. This is where she went full psychopath, he snarled. When she realized she was totally screwed, she started manufacturing this insane family drama story to manipulate you back into being her safety net. The brutal reality of her situation was crystal clear. Affair partner vanished, newborn baby screaming, zero income, and our bulletproof prenup ready to annihilate her in divorce court. My premarital house was completely untouchable, and living in an at-fault state meant her adultery would destroy any hope of financial compensation. She was staring down the barrel of complete life destruction with nowhere to run. She was sitting there with a baby, no money, no home, and the crushing realization that divorce court was going to be a massacre, her brother explained with savage satisfaction. That's when this calculating witch started getting creative, trying to transform herself from cheating homewrecker back into innocent victim. The family trauma narrative wasn't born from reality. It was a weaponized psychological attack designed to hijack my protective instincts and completely rewrite history. Instead of being the faithless wife who destroyed everything for a drug-addicted loser, she could become the tortured woman driven to desperate measures by family abuse. The affair baby wouldn't be proof of her betrayal. It would be tragic evidence of how family trauma had pushed her over the edge. Her manipulation was diabolically brilliant because she weaponized my love against me like a master strategist. She knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to make me feel protective instead of furious, guilty instead of betrayed. Every sob story was calculated psychological warfare designed to keep me as her emotional lifeline while she figured out how to escape the consequences of nuking our marriage. But here's what made her scheme truly deranged. She had zero long-term plan for maintaining these elaborate lies. What happened when I wanted to meet her family to offer support? How would she explain away the paternity test? What was her endgame for reconciling the fictional family abuse with reality? The terrifying answer was becoming clear. She had gambled everything on my stupidity, betting that her manipulation would be so masterful that I would never dig deep enough to uncover the truth. She had staked our entire relationship on my willingness to remain her emotional puppet while she schemed her way out of the wreckage she had created. This wasn't desperation. This was the calculated cruelty of a sociopath who would rather destroy my sanity than face the consequences of her choices. She was willing to psychologically torture the man she had promised to love and honor, all to avoid accountability for the affair that had blown up both our lives. But her brother was about to reveal that her house of lies was already crumbling, and the evidence he was preparing to share would give me nuclear weapons for the divorce war that was about to begin. Right at that moment, her brother dropped the most devastating bombshell of our entire conversation, revealing that he was about to hand me the nuclear arsenal I needed to obliterate my wife in divorce court. His voice shifted from disgust to determination as he made a confession that would change everything. "I'm done with my family's toxic garbage," he declared. "I've been watching this insanity for months, and I can't be part of it anymore. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve proof." What he revealed next left me speechless. Unlike the rest of his family, who had either enabled my wife's deception or remained willfully blind to her manipulation, he had been quietly documenting everything. While she was spinning elaborate lies to me about family trauma, she was simultaneously bragging to her family about her affair and her plans to manipulate me back into being her financial safety net. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She was living two completely different realities depending on her audience. "She's been sending screenshots of your conversations to our family group chat," he said, his voice heavy with shame. "Laughing about how gullible you are, celebrating every time you fell for another one of her sob stories. She was treating your pain like entertainment while planning her next manipulation move." The revelation that my genuine concern and love had been turned into family comedy was like a knife twisting in my chest. But the anger it generated was pure fuel for what was coming next. Her brother's conscience had finally reached its breaking point when he realized how deep he had gotten pulled into enabling her psychological warfare against me. "I've been watching her destroy a good man while she plays victim, and I can't live with that anymore," he continued. "My sister is sick, and my family has enabled her sickness for too long. I want out of this toxic mess, and I want to help you get justice. Then came the moment that transformed everything. He offered to provide evidence that would completely demolish her in court. "I have copies of the paternity test she tried to hide from you," he said. "I have screenshots of dozens of text messages where she admits to the affair, talks about her plans to move in with her lover, and discusses strategies for manipulating you into remaining her emotional and financial support. I have recordings of family conversations where she laughs about your stupidity for believing her lies." The evidence bonanza he was offering wasn't just helpful, it was absolutely devastating to any legal defense she might try to mount. Text messages admitting to adultery, proof of premeditated deception, documentation of her attempts to manipulate me psychologically, and family communications that revealed the conspiracy to gaslight me into remaining her safety net. This wasn't just smoking gun evidence, it was a nuclear weapon that would turn divorce proceedings into a complete massacre. "I'll send you everything tonight," he promised. "Screenshots, audio recordings, copies of documents, everything you need to bury her in court." She gambled that you would never find out the truth, but she forgot that some people still have consciences. His voice carried the weight of someone who had finally chosen moral clarity over family loyalty, and that choice was about to provide me with the most satisfying revenge imaginable. But the tragedy hadn't stopped there. As her brother prepared to betray his sister's confidence and hand me the evidence that would destroy her, he revealed one final detail that would make my confrontation with her even more brutal than either of us could have anticipated. But the tragedy was about to transform into the most satisfying victory of my entire life. Armed with her brother's nuclear evidence dump, I crafted a single text message that would detonate my wife's carefully constructed world of lies with surgical precision. "I know everything," I typed, my fingers steady with the confidence that comes from holding all the cards. "The affair, the paternity test, the manipulation, every single lie you've told me for months, it's over." The response was immediate and absolutely unhinged. Within minutes, my phone exploded with a barrage of the most vile, desperate messages I had ever received. The mask of victimhood that she had worn so skillfully for months disintegrated completely, revealing the true monster beneath. She unleashed a torrent of abuse that would have destroyed me weeks earlier, but now only served as additional evidence for my lawyer. Every insult, every threat, every desperate attempt to hurt me was another nail in the coffin of any sympathy she might have hoped to generate in divorce court. "You're pathetic," she screamed through text after text. "No wonder I had to find a real man who could actually satisfy me. You were never enough, and you never will be." The messages kept coming, each one more unhinged than the last, as she cycled through rage, bargaining, and pure desperation. But instead of engaging with her psychological warfare, I did something that must have driven her absolutely insane. I forwarded every single message directly to my lawyer without responding. The beautiful irony was that in her fury at being exposed, she was providing me with even more ammunition for the legal battle ahead. Every abusive message demonstrated her true character. Every desperate attempt to hurt me proved that her victim narrative had been pure performance. She was literally destroying herself while I watched from the safety of my moral high ground, completely protected by the evidence her own brother had provided. Meanwhile, I had already taken every practical step to secure my independence and protect my assets. The locks on my house had been changed within hours of learning the truth. Our finances were completely separated, ensuring she couldn't access any of my accounts or assets. Most importantly, my name was nowhere to be found on that baby's birth certificate, meaning I had zero legal or financial obligation to support the child that resulted from her affair. The prenuptial agreement that she had signed years earlier, probably never imagining she would be the one caught cheating, now stood like an impenetrable fortress protecting everything I had worked for. My premarital house, my savings, my retirement accounts, all completely beyond her reach. Living in an at-fault divorce state meant her adultery would be factored into every aspect of our settlement, essentially guaranteeing that she would leave our marriage with nothing but the wreckage of her own choices. As I watched her digital meltdown unfold through an endless stream of increasingly desperate messages, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: pure, unadulterated relief. The psychological torture was over, the gaslighting had ended, the manipulation had been exposed and neutralized. I was finally free from the woman who had tried to destroy my sanity while playing the victim of her own destructive choices. The giddiness I felt wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming my reality after months of having it systematically dismantled by someone I had trusted completely. She had gambled everything on my continued stupidity and lost spectacularly. Now, as divorce proceedings began with me holding nuclear evidence and her holding nothing but lies, I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel that would lead to my complete freedom from the most toxic person I had ever known. Sometimes the most elaborate lies collapse with a single phone call to the right person. I learned that master manipulators eventually destroy themselves when their web of deception becomes too complex to maintain. Truth always finds a way to surface, and when it does, justice becomes inevitable. The sweetest victory isn't getting revenge, it's realizing that toxic people are their own worst enemy. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is simply step out of their way and watch them destroy themselves. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And subscribe to join our community of resilient souls who've learned that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest superpower. Together, we're writing new endings to old stories, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you.